When the sun set in centuries past, the world did not simply darken, it transformed. Shadows grew longer. Candles flickered like fragile souls, and the line between day and night became a place of mystery. Before electricity, before screens, before the rush of modern life, people faced the night with awe, fear, and reverence. Sleep wasn't just rest. It was a journey, a crossing into the unknown. To prepare for that voyage, our ancestors performed countless bedtime rituals, some comforting, some peculiar, and some utterly bizarre. From whispering prayers to ancient spirits, to rubbing mystical herbs on their chests, to setting out bowls of milk for invisible guardians. People once believed that how you entered sleep determined what awaited you in your dreams, and perhaps beyond. Tonight we'll dim the lights and wander through time, exploring the strange, soothing, and sometimes eerie bedtime traditions from the ancient world to the medieval hearth. Section 1. The Dream Portals of Ancient Egypt. Long before silk sheets and soft pillows, the ancient Egyptians approached sleep as something far greater than simple rest. To them, the hours of slumber were sacred, a chance to commune with gods and spirits in the realm of dreams. The Egyptians believed that the soul, or Ba, left the body during sleep, fluttering through unseen worlds to gather divine messages. To prepare for this nightly voyage, they performed an elaborate series of rituals that would make even modern meditation look simple. Before bed, many Egyptians cleansed themselves in scented oils infused with lotus flowers, myrrh, and frankincense. The aroma was believed to purify the body and soothe the spirit, making the transition into sleep more harmonious. Wealthy nobles might have slaves anoint their temples with cool oil, while commoners rubbed crushed herbs onto their skin, basil for peace, and blue lotus to encourage prophetic dreams. In some households, priests would recite dream incantations from papyrus scrolls. These texts, discovered in tombs and temples, describe how to summon specific deities to one's dreams. One famous spell asked the god Thoth, the divine scribe, to open the gates of true vision, allowing dreamers to see glimpses of destiny. Some would even place tiny figurines of Thoth beside their beds, hoping his wisdom would guard them through the night. The Egyptian bed itself was often raised on legs carved to resemble lions or bulls, symbolizing protection and power. Beneath the bed, amulets in the shape of the Ankh or the Eye of Horus were tucked away to ward off evil spirits. And, for those plagued by nightmares, there was one particularly strange tradition, the ritual of the sleeping serpent. A priest might draw a circle around the sleeper's bed with a reed dipped in ink, invoking the serpent deity Wajet to coil around the dreamer's spirit and bite any evil that tried to approach. Even the direction one faced while sleeping mattered deeply. Egyptians believed that sleeping with one's head toward the rising sun connected them to Ra, the god of creation. Facing west, toward the land of the dead, was avoided unless one wished to commune with ancestors or departed loved ones. But the most fascinating part of their nighttime customs was what they did upon waking. In the early light, priests or household elders would help interpret the dreams, treating them as sacred messages. A dream of water could mean rebirth, a dream of a lion, strength and favor, and a nightmare of darkness, a warning that one's Ka, or life force, was in danger. For the Egyptians, The night was never merely an absence of light. It was an active, breathing mystery. Sleep was both a risk and a privilege. Every night, they crossed a threshold between worlds, trusting that morning would bring them safely home. Imagine drifting to sleep beneath the soft hum of desert winds, a flickering oil lamp casting gold upon the walls, the faint scent of lotus and myrrh in the air. To the ancient Egyptians, that was not just bedtime. It was an act of faith. Section 2. The Midnight Rituals of Ancient Rome, Between Silk and Superstition. When night descended upon the Eternal City, the Roman world shifted its rhythm. The clatter of markets quieted, the echo of sandals on marble faded, and the air filled with the smell of burning olive oil and distant hearth smoke. Behind the heavy curtains of patrician villas and within the cramped quarters of insular apartments, Romans prepared to do what might seem simple: to sleep. Yet, for them, sleep was far from a simple act. It was a delicate ritual, a negotiation between body, spirit, and the unseen forces that filled the night. To the Romans, the night was never empty. It was alive, teeming with gods, ancestral spirits, and strange omens. Before going to bed, many Romans felt compelled to protect themselves from the creatures that haunted the darkness, particularly the lemures and larvae, the restless ghosts of the unburied or forgotten dead. These wandering souls were believed to slip through cracks in walls and windows to torment the living. To ward them off, a curious ritual unfolded. The head of the household would rise after dinner, often just before extinguishing the last lamp, and walk barefoot through the home. He would clutch a handful of black beans, small, smooth, and said to have a sacred power to absorb evil. As he tossed them behind him, he would whisper, "With these beans I redeem me and mine." He dared not look back, for it was believed that the spirits followed the beans hungrily, collecting them like offerings. Once the ritual ended, he would strike bronze pots to drive away any lingering shadows. For the wealthier Romans, however, the pre-sleep ritual was also an art of indulgence. They treated bedtime as a final performance of the day. Soft couches draped in linen awaited them. Slaves scented the air with lavender and rose oil, and musicians sometimes played quiet melodies on the lyre to ease their masters' minds. In these moments, the Romans were half philosophers, half dreamers. For even sleep, they thought, should be civilized and deliberate. Roman physicians, like Galen, had plenty to say about sleep. They prescribed that one should never go to bed on a full stomach, lest the body's humors become confused. But if one struggled to fall asleep, Galen recommended a drink of warm milk with honey or a touch of poppy syrup, what might be considered one of the earliest sleeping potions. Some nobles, especially in the later empire, would burn the resin of storax or frankincense in small bronze censers near the bed. The smoke was thought to cleanse the air and invite pleasant dreams. But it wasn't all sweetness and tranquility. For the superstitious, nighttime was also a moment of great vulnerability. Dreams were portals, and through them, unwanted presences might intrude. To prevent this, some Romans wore amulets carved from bone or jet, shaped like hands making protective gestures, or depicting the phallus, which they believed could scare away evil spirits. Others tied red wool around their ankles, believing the color frightened away witches. And then there were the incantations. In dim candlelight, some Romans murmured whispered prayers to Somnus, the god of sleep, or to Morpheus, the bringer of dreams. "Grant me visions gentle and sweet," they might say, "and guard my soul till dawn." Mothers would whisper these words over their children, tracing protective symbols in the air above their small heads. Among the lower classes, sleep came with a different kind of ritual, one born of necessity and community. In crowded Roman insulae, where entire families might share a single room, people often slept in shifts. Before lying down, they would place a bowl of olive oil or water near the door to catch the evil eye. Some would draw small crosses or crescents on the walls in charcoal, a practice that quietly foreshadowed symbols of faith in later centuries. Even the physical act of sleeping held meaning. Romans preferred to sleep semi-upright, propped against cushions. They believed lying completely flat invited the soul to wander too far during the night. Couples slept apart, for moral as well as health reasons, and only newlyweds or lovers shared a bed regularly. Some Romans even claimed that the position of the moon affected sleep quality, that the crescent moon could draw restless dreams from the heart. And yet, despite the solemn rituals and protective charms, sleep in Rome could also be intimate and serene. Imagine a grand domus, its peristyle garden silent beneath the stars. A small lamp flickers beside a bed draped in linen, its light dancing across painted walls of red and gold. Outside, a nightingale sings from the olive trees. Within, a woman closes her eyes and murmurs a prayer to Venus for gentle dreams. In another corner of the city, a baker lies on his straw mattress, soot on his hands, the scent of bread still clinging to him, trusting that the gods will keep him through the night. But perhaps the strangest ritual of all was one performed not by nobles or commoners, but by the soldiers stationed far from home. Roman legionaries, sleeping beneath open skies, carried small charms sewn into leather pouches, bits of metal inscribed with Latin words of power. Before sleep, they would touch these charms and whisper, "Dormio in pace," meaning "I sleep in peace." To them, it wasn't just superstition, it was survival. They believed that without protection, their spirits might never find their way back to their bodies at dawn. Sleep, in Rome, was never just the closing of the eyes. It was an act of devotion, a ritual performance, a nightly return to balance between civilization and chaos. For the Romans, to sleep safely was a privilege earned through reverence, through prayers, offerings, and the quiet discipline of ritual. Even now, if you could walk through the ruins of an ancient Roman home at dusk, perhaps you'd sense the echoes, the faint scent of lavender still clinging to the stones, the murmur of forgotten prayers to Somnus, and the warmth of lamps long extinguished. In that stillness, you could almost believe that somewhere between the marble columns and shadowed courtyards, the night itself was still listening. Section 3. Medieval Europe. Sleeping between shadows and saints. In the long, dim hours after sunset, medieval Europe was a different world. The sun's warmth vanished from the fields and stone walls, and the day's noise, market bells, hoofbeats, blacksmiths' hammers, faded into silence. The only light came from flickering tallow candles, their smoke curling like ghosts toward the rafters. In this world, when night arrived, people did not simply go to bed. They prepared for darkness. Sleep, to the medieval mind, was not a private retreat or a quiet luxury. It was a spiritual and physical crossing. The line between the waking world and the realm of spirits was dangerously thin, and each night it was crossed with both fear and reverence. Before closing their eyes, men and women performed small rituals meant to protect the soul, the body, and even the household itself. The day ended with prayer. No matter how poor or rich, nearly everyone in medieval Christendom knelt before their bed, or straw-stuffed mattress, or pile of rushes, and recited the Compline, the final prayer of the day. In monasteries, the monks' chanting filled vast, echoing halls with a low hum that seemed to soothe the stones themselves. For villagers, the prayers were simpler but heartfelt. God, grant me a quiet night and a perfect end. This was not only a wish for peaceful sleep, it was also a preparation for death. For in those days, to sleep was to risk not waking again. To safeguard against such a fate, people surrounded themselves with symbols of protection. A small wooden cross might be hung above the bed. A lock of holy relic, a saint's hair, or a fragment of cloth might be tucked under the pillow. Some women whispered the Lord's Prayer backward, believing it confused the devil and kept him from visiting their dreams. Others recited a charm that dated back to older pagan times. Bone to bone, blood to blood, sleep sound, sleep good. In this, the old and the new faiths intertwined. Christian prayer blended with ancient folk magic. The bed itself was often more than a simple place to rest. In wealthier homes, it was a statement of power and status. Great canopied beds, draped with heavy curtains, were not only warm, but symbolic. Closed off from the cold world, they formed a private, almost sacred space. But in humbler cottages, where smoke from the fire lingered and the floor was cold, beds were often shared by the whole family. Parents, children, sometimes even servants and guests, slept side by side, limbs tangled, their breath rising and falling together in the darkness. This closeness was warmth, but also vulnerability. To guard the sleeping household, many families placed iron objects, scissors, knives, or nails, at the door or near the hearth, since iron was believed to repel demons and fairies. Babies were especially protected. They were never laid near the edge of the bed, for fear that spirits might carry them away. Sometimes, mothers tied red ribbons around their infants' wrists, believing the color frightened away evil. One of the strangest aspects of medieval sleep was how it happened in two parts. The night was not one long rest, but divided into what scholars now call the first sleep and second sleep. People would go to bed shortly after dusk and wake again around midnight. The hours between these two sleeps were a quiet, mysterious interlude. Some used them for prayer or contemplation. Others rekindled the fire, shared hushed conversations, or even visited neighbors. This middle-of-the-night wakefulness was seen as a natural part of life, an in-between time when the veil between worlds was thinnest. Witches, it was said, moved more freely then, and dreams carried messages worth remembering. Dreams were a vital part of the medieval night. They were not random flickers of imagination. They were windows to the soul. People believed dreams could carry divine revelations, warnings, or glimpses of the afterlife. A dream of water might foretell illness. A dream of gold might mean sin. Because of this, many people took care to prepare their minds before sleep. Reading the Psalms, washing one's hands, or sleeping in clean linen were believed to invite pure, holier dreams. Monks, who lived by strict order even in rest, followed a unique ritual. Their beds were hard, their rooms cold, but before lying down, they sprinkled holy water on the straw mattress and made the sign of the cross over it. Some even slept fully clothed, ready for prayer at the midnight bell. To sleep deeply, to forget the world too much, was seen as a form of indulgence. For the truly devout, the best sleep was light and short, just enough to restore the body for prayer at dawn. In contrast, peasants' bedtime rituals were more practical, but no less rich in superstition. They might hang a sprig of rosemary or a garlic bulb near the bed to ward off sickness. In the northern countryside, people burned juniper wood before sleeping. The fragrant smoke was thought to purify the air and keep away spirits that caused nightmares. In some regions, it was common to spit on the hearth embers before bed, sealing the home against wandering souls. But perhaps the most curious bedtime charm of all involved the shoe ritual. In several parts of medieval Europe, it was believed that if you placed your shoes in a certain way, one facing the bed, one facing away, you could confuse evil spirits who tried to climb into your dreams. Since demons supposedly entered through the soles of the feet, reversing the shoes meant they would lose their sense of direction. It seems strange now, but to the medieval sleeper, such a gesture was small insurance against a very real fear. For all their anxiety, however, the people of the Middle Ages also found beauty in the night. To sleep beneath the rhythm of the church bells, to feel the weight of blankets heavy with wool, to breathe in the smell of the hearth, that was a kind of comfort. Their world may have been dimly lit and filled with superstition, but it was also a world where the boundary between sacred and ordinary was soft. To them, every night was a miniature journey between this world and the next. And perhaps that's what made their rituals so deeply human. Beneath the prayers, the charms, and the symbols lay the same hope we all share, that when we close our eyes, we will wake again to the light of morning. Section 4. Dreaming Beneath the Moon. Sleep Rituals of Ancient China and Japan. Far from the stone castles and candlelight of medieval Europe, another world prepared for sleep in a very different way. In ancient China and Japan, nightfall did not carry only the fear of darkness, it carried reverence. The moon's light, cool and silver, was not something to hide from, but something to breathe in. It was believed to balance the spirit, to harmonize the soul with the rhythms of heaven and earth. In these lands, the rituals before sleep were acts of art. Quiet, graceful, deeply intentional. To sleep well was to live well. To sleep badly was not just an inconvenience, but a sign that one's spirit, or ki, was out of balance. And so, when dusk came, people did not simply crawl into bed. They aligned themselves with nature, with the cosmos, and with the mysterious journey of dreams that awaited. In ancient China, the scholars and poets often viewed sleep as an extension of philosophy. The Taoists believed that when a person slept, their hun, the ethereal soul, left the body and wandered through the unseen realms. This was not something to fear, but something to honor. The sleeping body was to be treated gently, for if startled, the soul might not return properly. For this reason, it was considered unwise to wake someone abruptly. To shout or shake a sleeper was like tugging at the wings of a butterfly mid-flight. Before sleep, people practiced gentle breathing exercises, slow inhalations to calm the shen, spirit, steady exhalations to release the tensions of the day. They sometimes burned sandalwood incense, letting its fragrance fill the air. The scent was believed to carry prayers upward and attract benevolent spirits who guarded the dreamer through the night. Even the position of one's bed was carefully chosen. It was unlucky to sleep with one's head facing north, the direction associated with death, but auspicious to face east toward the rising sun, symbol of renewal. Among the nobility and scholars, there was an elegant custom called night writing. By the light of an oil lamp, one would record a few lines of reflection or poetry before lying down. These writings were not meant for others to read, but for the self, to clear the heart and settle the mind. Ink before dream, they said, and sleep becomes pure. Many believed that if the heart was unsettled, the dreams would be chaotic, and chaos in dreams could ripple into waking life. In rural villages, sleep had a more protective ritual. People often hung red charms or paper talismans near their beds, small strips inscribed with blessings from Taoist priests. These wards guarded against hungry ghosts, restless spirits that wandered by night, drawn to the warmth of human breath. Families also avoided pointing their feet directly at the door when sleeping. To do so was to invite the dead, since coffins were carried out feet first. Even the materials of the bed had meaning. In summer, people slept on bamboo mats that cooled the body's energy. In winter, they used heated stones or clay pillows, sometimes filled with herbs like mugwort, believed to purify the mind. Some scholars wrote that the pillow was a bridge between worlds, because one's head rested upon it as the consciousness drifted into dreams. Certain pillows were even carved with good luck symbols, cranes, clouds, and flowing water, hoping to guide the sleeper's spirit into peaceful visions. And those dreams, how carefully they were read. Dream interpretation was a refined art in ancient China, practiced by both emperors and commoners. The famous Book of Dreams, attributed to the philosopher Zhou Gong, became a guide for centuries. It listed thousands of possible dream images and their meanings. Dreaming of rain meant fortune, of fire meant change, of losing one's teeth meant the death of a relative. Each morning, dreamers were encouraged to sit quietly, breathe deeply, and recall their dreams before the day began. Forgetting a dream too quickly was seen as disrespectful to the messages of the spirits. Meanwhile, across the sea in ancient Japan, sleep was surrounded by a different, yet equally rich web of rituals. The Japanese word for sleep, nemuri, carried both softness and sacredness. The act of lying down was almost ceremonial. Houses were small, with paper walls and tatami mats, and people laid out their futons each night like a ritual of renewal. Every evening, the bedding was unrolled, aired, and smoothed. In the morning, it was folded away again, an elegant reminder that nothing in life should be left stagnant. Before sleeping, families in old Japan performed quiet purification rituals. Water was sprinkled at the entrance of the home, and small offerings, rice, sake, or flowers, were placed before the household shrine, known as the kamidana. These gestures invited the kami, the ancestral spirits, to protect the home while everyone slept. In some regions, a small branch of evergreen pine was laid beside the pillow to ward off bad dreams, since pine symbolized long life and steadfastness. One of the most curious Japanese sleep customs involved writing down one's worries on paper before bed. People believed that by transferring their anxieties onto the page and leaving the note near the window, the night wind would carry those troubles away. Sometimes, the paper was folded into the shape of a crane, a bird associated with peace, and released into a nearby stream the next morning. This quiet ritual was both psychological and spiritual, an act of letting go before surrendering to rest. The Japanese also believed that dreams could connect the living and the dead. On certain nights, such as Obon, when spirits were thought to return to visit their families, people prepared their sleeping spaces with special care. They avoided loud noises, excessive light, or arguments so as not to disturb any visiting ancestors. A calm, respectful atmosphere invited peaceful dreams and harmonious energy. And sometimes, those dreams were recorded in journals, not as omens, but as gifts from the unseen world. Sleep, for both ancient Chinese and Japanese cultures, was a moment of harmony between body and cosmos, a still point between yin and yang. To sleep well was not a passive act, it was an art, a discipline, and even a form of prayer. Every breath, every incense wisp, every folded blanket carried meaning. In these quiet rooms lit by oil lamps, surrounded by the scent of cedar and ink, people sought not just rest, but balance. Their rituals remind us that sleep was never merely about closing one's eyes. It was about aligning one's heart with the larger rhythm of the universe. Section 5. Firelight and Spirits, the Sleep Rituals of the Ancient Americas. Imagine a time before walls, before beds, before the concept of bedrooms even existed. The air is heavy with the scent of smoke and soil. The stars, countless and close, shimmer like living eyes above the dark horizon. Beneath them, families of the ancient Americas, Mayans, Incas, Aztecs, and countless tribal nations across the continents prepared for sleep, not behind locked doors, but beneath the sky itself, where the boundary between dream and spirit was thin as mist. To these people, night was never simply a time of rest. It was a sacred passage, an intimate reunion with the unseen world. While the daylight hours belonged to the hunt, to farming, to craft and war, the night was for communion. To close one's eyes was to travel. To dream was to meet the spirits. And so when dusk arrived, the rituals began. Among the ancient Mayans, sleep was closely tied to the gods. They believed that each person's dreams were messages carried by spirit animals, or wayab. These were not mere symbols, but living extensions of the soul that roamed freely at night. A jaguar, a bird, a snake, whatever creature appeared in your dreams was your spiritual double, protecting or warning you from beyond the veil. Because of this belief, Mayans took care to create calm, pure surroundings before sleeping. Loud noises or emotional turmoil were thought to disturb the spirit's nightly journey. Inside Mayan homes, simple structures of clay and palm leaves, people often burned copal resin, a fragrant incense made from tree sap. The smoke was sacred. It connected heaven, earth, and the underworld. Before lying down, elders might wave the smoke around the sleeping area, whispering prayers to Ixchel, the goddess of the moon and dreams, asking her to bless the sleepers with wisdom and protection. It wasn't unusual for families to sleep close together, often on woven mats. This closeness wasn't just for warmth, it was for safety. The spirits that roamed at night could not easily take someone who slept within the circle of their kin. Further south, in the Incan Empire, sleep was viewed as a kind of death and rebirth. Each night, they believed, the body died a small death, only to awaken renewed by the rising sun, the living form of their god, Inti. To honor this cycle, many Incan rituals before sleep involved thanksgiving to the sun, even at dusk. People offered coca leaves or a small portion of food to the earth, Pachamama, and then turned their eyes toward the mountains, whispering soft words of gratitude. They asked for peaceful dreams and safe passage through the night's shadow world. The Incas often slept on alpaca wool blankets and straw mats, but their sleeping spaces were arranged with symbolic precision. The head would face east toward the dawn, so that upon waking, the sleeper greeted the sun directly. To face west was considered unlucky. It meant turning your back to the renewal of life. In noble households, carved stone or wooden amulets were placed near the bed. Small figurines of animals, deities, or ancestors meant to guard the dreamer's spirit while it wandered. Children especially were given protective charms, for it was said that young souls could too easily slip away into the otherworld and forget to return. Meanwhile, in the Aztec Empire, the night was a world of power and danger. The Aztecs revered Tezcatlipoca, the god of the night sky, dreams, and sorcery. He was both feared and respected, for dreams were his domain, and they could be gifts or curses. Before sleeping, Aztec priests would offer obsidian mirrors or small food offerings to appease him. Ordinary people, too, performed nightly acts of purification, washing their faces and hands in cool water to cleanse away the day's energies. This ritual washing symbolized humility and renewal, ensuring that they entered the dream world in a state of balance. Aztec healers often prescribed special herbs to those plagued by bad dreams: cacao, chili, or the fragrant cempasúchil flower, what we now call marigold. They believed its golden hue connected it to the sun and could drive away darkness. Some even placed the petals beneath their pillows to protect the soul as it drifted through the shadow realm. Across North America, the indigenous tribes carried their own powerful nighttime traditions. Among the Lakota Sioux, sleep was deeply spiritual. Before lying down, some families would pray softly to the Great Spirit, asking for dreams that would guide them or warn them of the future. Dreams were not dismissed as random thoughts. They were lessons, communications from ancestors or totem animals. That's why dream catchers, those woven hoops hung near sleeping areas, were not mere decorations, but sacred tools. The web caught harmful dreams in its threads, letting only the good visions slip through the center hole to the sleeper below. When the first rays of the morning sun touched it, the bad dreams dissolved like mist. Other tribes, like the Navajo, took dreams even more seriously. They believed that the soul could wander far at night and encounter spirits, animals, or even other dreamers. Because of this, waking someone suddenly was taboo. It might trap their soul outside the body. Instead, they were awakened gently by the sound of soft singing or by the warmth of firelight. Fires, in fact, were central to many Native American sleep rituals. The glow of the flame symbolized the presence of life in the darkness. Families often slept around a communal fire, and its rhythm, the crackling wood, the shifting shadows, became a lullaby of its own. It was said that the fire could listen to human dreams, carry them upward with its smoke, and whisper them to the stars. In some tribal traditions, children were told bedtime stories not to entertain, but to protect. Stories of animal spirits, tricksters, or ancient heroes kept the night's silence from feeling empty. These tales were more than folklore. They were a way of teaching courage and wisdom through the gentle doorway of dreams. Across these civilizations, one theme glows constant as the embers of those long-ago fires. Sleep was sacred. It was never wasted time. It was connection between the living and the dead, between humans and gods, between the heart and the cosmos. The people of the ancient Americas didn't fall asleep. They crossed over. Each night was an act of faith, each dream a message from the beyond. Even now, when we lie beneath our modern roofs, surrounded by electric light and restless thoughts, some of that ancient reverence still stirs within us. We may not burn copal or face the sunrise, but when our eyes close and our breath slows, a fragment of those old rituals returns. We, too, become travelers, dreamers wandering in the dark, carrying whispers from the firelit ages of long ago. Section 6. Moonlight, Prayers and Ghosts, the Sleep Rituals of Medieval Europe. Night in medieval Europe was not a peaceful time. To sleep was to surrender. To the dark, to uncertainty, and to a world that seemed always on the edge of the supernatural. For people living in castles or cottages, sleep came with ritual, fear, and faith, all mingled in the flickering half-light of a single candle. Imagine a small village in 14th century England. The streets are silent now, the air heavy with damp and wood smoke. Inside a timber-framed cottage, a family prepares for bed. The day's work is done. The hearth fire burns low, casting long shadows across the thatched ceiling. But before anyone lies down, there are things to do. The night, after all, belongs to spirits. For the medieval mind, sleep was a vulnerable state. When the body rested, the soul was thought to wander freely, drifting through invisible realms. And in those same hours, dark things moved. Too, ghosts, demons, and creatures born of sin or witchcraft. So the first and most common bedtime ritual was prayer. Not a simple good night, but a full spiritual armor. "Now I lay me down to sleep" may sound quaint today, but its origins go back to this very fear, that one might not wake at all. Many people would cross themselves 3 times before lying down, once for the Father, once for the Son, and once for the Holy Ghost. This triple motion was believed to ward off evil spirits that prowled at night. The sign of the cross was often traced not only on the body, but on the bedpost, the door, or even on a child's forehead. For the devout, it was said that angels stood guard at the corners of the bed, protecting the sleeper from the devil's temptations. Beds themselves were treated as sacred spaces. Wealthy nobles slept in grand, curtained beds, often draped in heavy velvet or wool. But those curtains weren't just for warmth. They were a defense. In a world without central heating, yes, they trapped heat. But more importantly, they kept out drafts believed to carry disease and demons alike. The medieval person saw illness and evil as close cousins, and the night air was often blamed for both. In rural cottages, however, sleeping arrangements were far more humble and far more crowded. Whole families often slept together in one bed or on straw pallets beside the fire. Yet even here, ritual mattered. Some placed iron tools, a knife, a sickle, or a nail, by the head of the bed, believing iron repelled fairies and wicked spirits. Others hung garlic or dried herbs, particularly rue and rosemary, near the doorway to ward off witches who might slip in under cover of darkness. In certain parts of Germany and Scandinavia, people even sprinkled a line of salt along the threshold of their bedroom or hearth before sleeping. Salt, in their minds, was the essence of purity. It symbolized incorruptibility and the eternal. Evil, it was believed, could not cross it. For that reason, a newborn's cradle often had salt tucked beneath it, and so did the beds of those who were sick or dying. Medieval people didn't think of night as one long, uninterrupted sleep. Instead, they followed what historians now call segmented sleep. Most people went to bed soon after sunset, sleeping for several hours before waking around midnight for a period known as the watch. This hour, or sometimes 2, was considered sacred. The streets were silent, the fire burned low, and in that stillness, people prayed, meditated, wrote letters, or even visited neighbors. Some believed that at this hour, the veil between worlds was thin, that prayers spoken then were more likely to reach heaven. Others feared the same hour, believing it to be when witches and spirits were most active. Once the watch ended, people returned to their beds for a second sleep, a gentler, dreamier rest that lasted until dawn. It was during this second sleep, many believed, that true dreams came. Visions, omens, or messages from God. Books of dream interpretation were common even among the clergy, blending Christian symbolism with pagan echoes. Dreaming of water might mean purification, of fire, temptation, of animals, guidance from angels, or sometimes demons. There were also customs for banishing nightmares, which were thought to be caused by night hags, invisible creatures that sat on a person's chest and rode them as they slept. The word nightmare itself comes from this belief, the mara being a demonic being or spirit. To keep them away, people recited protective verses before bed or placed holy objects nearby, crucifixes, rosary beads, or small wooden carvings of saints. In particularly fearful households, the head of the bed might be positioned facing east, toward Jerusalem and the rising sun, symbolizing resurrection and divine light. Sleeping with one's feet toward the west, however, was seen as an omen of death, since the dead were often buried with their feet in that direction, facing the sunrise for Judgment Day. Not all nighttime rituals were purely defensive. In monasteries and convents, for example, night was a sacred rhythm of devotion. Monks rose at specific hours, matins and lauds, to chant and pray in the dark. The echo of their voices filled cold stone halls, blending with the rustle of robes and the distant wind. Sleep was treated as a spiritual trial, a time to show discipline, humility, and closeness to God. In some strict orders, monks even slept sitting upright in wooden stalls, so as not to fall into indulgent comfort. Among peasants, meanwhile, warmth was life. Before sleeping, the fire had to be carefully managed, not just for safety, but for survival. A single ember kept glowing through the night, banked beneath ashes, would ensure that the family could relight the fire in the morning. Letting the fire die completely was bad luck, even dangerous. So each night, as the last spark was covered, the head of the household murmured a fire prayer, a short blessing that asked God to keep the fire of hell far from this house. And then, of course, there were the personal rituals, the quiet gestures people made before closing their eyes. A mother might whisper a charm over her children. A soldier might lay his sword beside him, edge turned outward, just in case. A young woman might slip a small token, a ribbon, a sprig of ivy, beneath her pillow to dream of her future husband. The lines between magic, faith, and hope blurred easily in the medieval night. The darkness itself had personality, a presence. It wasn't simply the absence of light. It was an entity that watched, listened, and had to be respected. People greeted it with caution and prayer, like a guest that might bless or curse them. And perhaps that's why, when the rooster finally crowed and the first light of dawn poured through cracks in the shutters, people didn't simply wake, they gave thanks. They had crossed the night safely. The demons had stayed at bay. The fire still glowed. The world once again belonged to the living. Section 7. Incense, Stillness, and the Spirit. The peaceful sleep rituals of ancient Asia. When we step into the nights of ancient Asia, we find something altogether different from the wary, prayer-filled darkness of medieval Europe. Here, sleep was not seen merely as a vulnerable pause in human life. It was part of the rhythm of existence itself. The goal was not to guard against spirits, but to become one with the gentle order of the universe before closing one's eyes. Let's begin in ancient China, where the concept of sleep was deeply tied to balance, the eternal dance between yin and yang. Yin was the dark, the cool, the still. It represented the night itself. To sleep well meant to let the yin flow through your body, to return to the calm side of nature after a day filled with the fire of yang. Before nightfall, many households would begin a quiet, ritualistic winding down. The lamps were dimmed early, not only to save oil, but to signal the body that the day was retreating. Lanterns made of paper or silk glowed softly, their light resembling that of the moon. The scent of sandalwood or jasmine incense filled the air, meant to calm both the body and the wandering spirit. In Taoist households, it was believed that the spirit, known as the Hun, drifted out of the body during sleep, and that peaceful surroundings helped it find its way back safely in the morning. The wealthier families of China, particularly scholars and poets, had a refined approach to rest. Their bedrooms were often minimalist, guided by the principles of feng shui, the art of harmonizing energy within a space. The bed was positioned away from the door, never directly facing it, because the flow of energy, or qi, entering the room through the door could disturb the sleeper's spirit. The head of the bed was often placed against a solid wall, symbolizing support and stability, while mirrors were covered or avoided altogether at night, for fear that they might capture and confuse the wandering soul. To further ensure restful sleep, some drank tea infusions, not of caffeine, but of calming herbs, lotus seeds, chrysanthemum petals, or dried jujube fruit. These were believed to cool the heart and settle the spirit, easing dreams and bringing emotional balance. In certain dynasties, physicians wrote entire manuals on the proper way to prepare the body for rest. Gentle stretches, deep breathing, and mental stillness were all recommended. A mind at peace led to dreams that revealed truth, and for scholars and monks alike, dreams were messages, not distractions. Traveling east to Japan, we find another kind of quiet devotion in the act of preparing for sleep. The Japanese concept of purity extended into every moment of life, and bedtime was no exception. Long before modern sleep hygiene existed, the people of ancient Japan practiced what we might call ritual cleansing before lying down. Bathing was a sacred act, a way not just to wash away dirt, but to purify the spirit of the day's troubles. Even peasants who had little access to hot water would rinse their hands and faces, or at least their feet, before entering the sleeping area. The rich, meanwhile, might enjoy a hot soak infused with hinoki cypress or yuzu citrus, filling the air with an aroma that calmed the senses and cleansed the energy of the body. Beds, or futons, were laid directly on tatami mats, firm yet soft, designed to align the spine and keep the body close to the earth's energy. The simplicity was intentional. Too much comfort, it was believed, led to indulgence and laziness of spirit. Even the placement of the futon mattered. One's head should not face north, the direction associated with death and funerary rites. Before sleep, many Japanese practiced quiet meditation, often seated before a small household shrine, or simply facing the open window, gazing at the moon. The moon held deep symbolic meaning, a reminder of impermanence, reflection, and the passage of time. Monks and laypeople alike found serenity in this stillness, allowing their breath to slow until their thoughts drifted like autumn leaves. Some even composed poems or haiku before bed, a form of emotional cleansing that allowed the mind to rest freely. To the Japanese of old, the night was not something to escape, it was a teacher. Silence, darkness, and solitude were seen as opportunities to meet oneself. Meanwhile, in ancient India, sleep carried profound spiritual meaning as well. The teachings of Ayurveda, the traditional system of medicine, described sleep, nidra, as one of the three pillars of health, along with food and discipline. Losing sleep was not just inconvenient, it was seen as a disturbance to the soul itself. Before bed, people followed detailed rituals of self-care known as dinacharya. These included cleansing the body with warm oils, sesame or coconut oil, massage gently into the feet, scalp, and temples. This wasn't simply physical relaxation, it was spiritual grounding. Oil was believed to calm the body's vata energy, which governed movement, anxiety, and the wandering of the mind. When vata was pacified, rest came easily. Many families also lit a small oil lamp, called a diya, before sleeping. The lamp's flame symbolized the divine light within, guiding the spirit even in the realm of dreams. Prayers were offered to deities like Vishnu, who was said to sleep on the cosmic serpent between cycles of creation, a reminder that even gods rested and that sleep was sacred. Children were often told to listen to gentle Vedic chants or stories from the Mahabharata and Ramayana before bed. Tales filled with rhythm and cosmic order that lulled them into peaceful sleep. The sound of these stories, accompanied by the smell of ghee lamps and sandalwood, created a sense of continuity between waking life and the eternal. For yogis and monks, however, sleep itself became a kind of spiritual practice. The advanced meditation known as yoga nidra, or yogic sleep, was used to reach the border between consciousness and rest. In this state, the body slept, but the mind remained aware, a perfect balance of inner calm and clarity. Some texts describe great masters who could remain in this state for hours, resting deeply while maintaining complete control of their breath and awareness. Across all these lands, from the mountains of Japan to the river valleys of India, one theme unites these rituals. Sleep was not merely recovery. It was return to nature, to self, to spirit. To fall asleep was to return to the universal rhythm that beats beneath all living things. Where Europe's nights were guarded with prayer and iron, Asia's were softened with incense and meditation. And in that gentle surrender, people found not fear, but harmony. Section 8. Drums, Firelight, and Dreams. The night rituals of ancient Africa and indigenous peoples. When the sun sank below the horizon in the ancient world, the rhythm of life didn't stop. It simply changed. In Africa, the night was alive with sound. Crickets chirped in the tall grass, wind whispered through acacia branches, and from the distance came the low, steady pulse of a drum. To the people who lived close to the earth, sleep wasn't just rest. It was part of the natural rhythm of the world, a deep pause in the endless song of life. Across the Sahel, the Nile Valley, and the rainforests, communities had rituals that marked the slow passage from wakefulness to rest. These rituals weren't private, quiet affairs hidden behind walls, but open, shared acts that united the tribe, the family, and the ancestors. In ancient Egypt, for instance, sleep was treated almost as a rehearsal for eternity. Egyptians believed that the human soul, known as the Ba, would rise from the body at night, traveling through the realms of dream and spirit, only to return with the dawn. Because of this, the setting of the bed was sacred. People often placed protective amulets beneath their pillows, small carvings of scarabs, eyes, or ankhs. These were meant to guide the Ba through the underworld safely, much like a map. Wealthier Egyptians even had beds carved from wood or stone, sometimes shaped like lions, symbols of strength and protection. Before sleep, a small oil lamp or incense burner might be lit, filling the room with the smell of myrrh or blue lotus, scents thought to please the gods and ease the spirit into dreaming. Dreams themselves were seen as messages from the divine. A strange or vivid dream would be discussed the next morning with priests who specialized in dream interpretation. In this way, sleep was never meaningless. It was communication between human and God, the physical and the unseen. But beyond the temples and palaces, in the heart of Africa, in villages surrounded by forests or open plains. The rituals before rest were guided not by gold or priests, but by firelight and rhythm. As darkness fell, families and elders gathered around the fire, telling stories. These stories weren't mere entertainment. They were lessons, history, and identity, spoken lullabies for the soul. The flickering flames would cast long, dancing shadows, and the rhythm of drums or hand claps would carry a gentle pulse into the night. In some tribes, especially in parts of West Africa, people believed that the sound of the drum helped guide dreams, connecting the sleeper to the spirit world. The Dagara people of Burkina Faso, for example, saw night as a time when the veil between worlds grew thin. Drumming, singing, or softly humming was a way to honor the ancestors, to let them know that the living remembered them even as they slept. Before bed, it was common for people to rub natural oils or herbal mixtures into their skin, shea butter, palm oil, or crushed leaves with medicinal scents. These weren't just for comfort. They were spiritual shields. The scent of certain herbs, like baobab or lemongrass, was thought to repel negative spirits that wandered in the dark. In many regions, sleeping positions also had meaning. Families often slept in circular formations around the fire, with elders or children in the center. This was practical. The fire provided warmth and safety, but it also symbolized unity, the family forming a living circle of protection. For nomadic groups in desert regions, sleeping was done in shifts. One or two people stayed awake to tend the fire and watch the horizon, while others rested, ensuring the camp remained safe. The sound of the crackling fire became a lullaby of its own. Across the sea, among indigenous peoples of the Americas, we find an even deeper connection between sleep, nature, and spirit. For many native cultures, dreams weren't just random. They were sacred journeys. The Ojibwe people, for instance, created dream catchers, delicate webs of sinew stretched across hoops of willow, hung above the sleeper's bed. According to their belief, the night was filled with dreams, both good and bad. The web caught the harmful ones, letting only the good pass through. By morning, the sun's light would burn away the rest. Before sleep, families often performed quiet rituals of gratitude, thanking the earth, the animals, and the ancestors for the day that had passed. Smoke from burning sage or cedar would fill the room or teepee, cleansing it of any lingering negative energy. It was a way of resetting not just the space, but the mind. In the American Southwest, the Pueblo peoples practiced similar rituals with cornmeal and feathers, offering small gifts to the spirits of wind and rain before rest. Sleep, they believed, was a time when the soul joined the natural world in harmony, a kind of nightly homecoming. The Maya and Aztec civilizations of Mesoamerica also had complex beliefs about sleep. They saw dreams as voyages into the spiritual realms, guided by gods and ancestors. Some people even slept near obsidian mirrors or crystals, which they believed acted as gateways between the waking and dreaming worlds. The body might rest, but the spirit continued its work, exploring the vast landscapes of creation. Far across the Pacific, among the indigenous Polynesian peoples, nighttime was equally rich with tradition. On tropical islands surrounded by the sound of waves, sleep took place not in silence, but to the rhythm of the ocean. The sea itself was seen as a living being, and its pulse was the heartbeat of the world. Before sleeping, families would gather to chant or sing softly, sometimes telling ancestral stories that traced their lineage back to gods who arrived on canoes from the stars. The belief was that, By remembering the past, the spirit would be guided through the night's dreams without fear or confusion. Beds were simple mats woven from pandanus leaves, and sleep was often communal, shared under one roof or even beneath the open sky. The scent of salt air mixed with the aroma of burning coconut husks, creating a gentle calm that cradled the senses. One fascinating ritual among certain Pacific Islanders involved star alignment rest, lying down with one's head pointing toward a specific constellation associated with protection or family. The stars themselves were seen as ancestors watching over the living. Falling asleep beneath them wasn't just peaceful, it was profoundly spiritual. Across all these cultures, one truth emerges. The act of sleeping was not a small personal escape from the world. It was an act of belonging to community, to ancestors, to the land and sky. Every drumbeat, every chant, every flicker of flame or wisp of incense was a way to remind the sleeper, you are not alone. Even in the dark, the world holds you. When we compare this to modern life, the hum of screens, the glow of streetlights, the isolation of closed doors, something ancient stirs within us. We begin to remember that sleep isn't just rest, it's reconnection. And perhaps, if we listened closely before bed, to the rhythm of our own heartbeat, the sound of the night, we'd feel that same quiet unity our ancestors once knew. Section 9. Dream Temples and Prophecies, the Sacred Sleep of Ancient Greece and Rome. As night fell over the marble cities and olive groves of the ancient Mediterranean, the people of Greece and Rome didn't just drift into sleep. They entered a sacred dialogue with the gods. To them, dreams were not fleeting images born of imagination. They were divine communiques, messages sent by higher beings to guide, warn, or heal. In this world, sleep wasn't just the body's rest. It was a spiritual pilgrimage. In ancient Greece, this belief gave rise to one of the most fascinating institutions in history, the Asclepion, or Dream Temple. These sanctuaries were dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, whose gentle hand was said to mend both body and soul. People came from far and wide to sleep within the walls of these temples, hoping that Asclepius would visit them in their dreams and reveal a cure. The process was called incubation, from the Greek word enkymesis, literally meaning to lie down. But this was no ordinary sleep. Before entering the sacred chamber, visitors underwent a careful purification ritual. They bathed in cool, scented water, fasted for a day or two, and abstained from wine or worldly pleasures. Priests, known as therapeutae, guided them through prayers and chants, invoking the presence of the god. Then, as night descended, the pilgrims lay down upon simple pallets or mats spread across the temple floor. Around them, the air was thick with the smell of burning incense and laurel leaves, and the faint flicker of oil lamps painted shadows on the marble walls. In the stillness, the only sounds were the quiet breaths of hundreds of sleepers, men and women, rich and poor alike, waiting for divine visions. It was believed that during this sleep, Asclepius himself would appear, sometimes as a glowing figure, other times as a serpent, his sacred symbol. The god would touch or whisper to the dreamer, revealing what needed to be done for healing, perhaps a specific herb, a pilgrimage, or a ritual of gratitude. When dawn arrived, the dreamers shared their visions with temple priests, who interpreted them and prescribed treatments accordingly. Inscriptions on temple walls recorded countless testimonies, miraculous recoveries, divine encounters, and even warnings that saved lives. Some of these dreams were beautifully symbolic. A woman who dreamt of being freed from chains might wake cured of paralysis. A man who saw himself drinking pure water from a golden cup might find his fever gone. For the Greeks, the language of the dream was poetic, full of signs and riddles that revealed the state of the soul. Yet not all slept in temples. In private homes, the nightly rituals of sleep also carried spiritual weight. Many Greeks kept small altars or figurines of gods near their beds. Hermes, the messenger god who guided dreams. Hypnos, the gentle god of sleep, or his brother Thanatos, who embodied peaceful death. Before bed, it was customary to wash one's hands and feet, light a small lamp, and whisper a prayer for safe passage through the night's unknown realms. For the philosophers, dreams were both a mystery and a puzzle. Aristotle believed dreams were echoes of waking life, reflections of the soul processing impressions and thoughts. But others, like Artemidorus, a second-century dream interpreter, saw them as coded prophecies. His great work, Oneirocritica, became a manual for understanding the symbols of the subconscious, long before Freud or Jung ever existed. Crossing from Greece to ancient Rome, the fascination with dreams continued, but it became more political, more theatrical. Roman generals, senators, and emperors often made crucial decisions based on dreams. Before major battles or declarations, leaders would consult dream interpreters, known as conjectors, who served much like astrologers or seers. One of the most famous stories is that of Julius Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, who dreamt of his assassination the night before it happened. She begged him not to attend the Senate that day, but Caesar, proud and rational, ignored the warning and was struck down exactly as her dream foretold. The Romans also practiced a form of dream incubation in temples dedicated to Serapis, a Greco-Egyptian god associated with healing and prophecy. Pilgrims would sleep in chambers, perfumed with herbs and oils, hoping for divine visions. Others sought guidance from Mithras, a god of light and rebirth, whose followers believed that sleep and dreams offered glimpses into the cosmic struggle between light and darkness. What makes these rituals so fascinating is not just their devotion, but their intimacy. Imagine standing in a Roman villa at dusk, the marble floors cool beneath your feet, the air scented with olive oil lamps and crushed rosemary. The master of the house would often pour a small libation of wine to the household spirits, known as the Lares and Penates, asking for protection through the night. Slaves would lower the heavy curtains to keep out the chill, and perhaps a small bronze statuette of a god would be placed near the bed, an ancient form of a nightlight, a guardian watching over dreams. In the Roman world, sleep was also tied to omens and cosmic forces. Certain nights were believed to be luckier for dreaming than others. The kalends, the first day of the month, was thought to bring prophetic dreams, while dreams that came during the Ides, middle of the month, might carry warnings. A dream seen before midnight was said to belong to the body, mere digestion of thought. But a dream after midnight belonged to the soul, and thus to the gods. Some Romans even crafted amulets and charms to enhance dream clarity or ward off nightmares. These were made from metals like silver or lead, inscribed with words of power or protective symbols. Others placed sprigs of rue, bay, or rosemary under their pillows, herbs associated with purification and divine favor. In the countryside, shepherds and farmers had their own humble rituals. Before sleeping under the open sky, they often whispered blessings to the stars, or murmured short verses passed down through generations. Small prayers for safe rest, protection from spirits, and clear dreams. To these people, the night was alive, full of voices, omens, and mysteries waiting to be felt. And perhaps the most remarkable part of all this is how deeply communal and sacred sleep once was. Today, we often see it as an interruption in our schedules, a biological necessity, squeezed between the demands of waking life. But for the Greeks and Romans, it was something altogether more beautiful, an encounter with forces beyond human understanding. Each night, as they lay beneath the same stars we see today, they believed their souls traveled to temples of light, to gods of healing, to ancestors who spoke in symbols. To sleep was to surrender to the divine, and as we reflect on that now, in our quiet rooms filled with electric hums and soft digital glow, there's something hauntingly peaceful about the idea that long ago, falling asleep meant entering a world where God still spoke, and dreams could change the course of history. Section 10. The Eastern Night, Ancient Asia's sacred balance between sleep, spirit, and the cosmos. If sleep in the West was a doorway to the gods, then in the East it was a delicate dance between energy, harmony, and the unseen flow of life itself. Across ancient China, Japan, and India, people didn't just rest their bodies. They aligned their spirits with the universe. To them, every breath, every dream, and every quiet hour of the night was woven into something greater, a pulse of balance that flowed through all existence. Let us begin in ancient China, where the teachings of Taoism and Confucian philosophy shaped nearly every aspect of daily life, including sleep. According to traditional Chinese belief, the human body was not a collection of organs and bones, but a landscape of qi, the vital energy that flows through invisible channels called meridians. To live in harmony with nature, one had to move, eat, breathe, and even sleep in ways that balanced this energy. Sleeping, then, was not just rest, it was alignment. The position of one's bed, the time of night one lay down, and even the direction of one's head all mattered profoundly. Classical Chinese texts advise that to maintain good fortune and health, one's head should never point north, for that aligned with the energy of stillness and death. Instead, the ideal direction was east, toward the rising sun, the direction of life, renewal, and the breath of dawn. Many families arranged their entire sleeping quarters according to the principles of Feng Shui, ensuring that the flow of qi was smooth, unblocked, and peaceful. Beds were often placed away from doors or windows to avoid harsh sha qi, negative or rushing energy that could disturb sleep. Candles and incense burned softly before bedtime, and rooms were often kept uncluttered, symbolizing a clear and undisturbed spirit. But it wasn't only about positioning, it was about timing. The ancients believed that the body's organs followed a cosmic clock, each one governing a 2-hour period of the night. To sleep too late or rise too early could disturb this rhythm. Between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., for example, was the time of the gallbladder, the organ associated with decision-making and courage. If one stayed awake during these hours, the mind could grow anxious, indecisive, or weak-willed. Between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., the liver was believed to cleanse and renew itself, a sacred time when deep sleep restored both emotion and energy. So to sleep well was to heal, both physically and spiritually. And if one dreamed vividly, those dreams were not random illusions, but messages from qi itself, reflections of imbalance or signs of internal harmony. A dream of water, for instance, might mean serenity, while dreams of fire could point to agitation in the heart. Across the seas in ancient Japan, sleep too was sacred, but it carried a sense of simplicity, humility, and spiritual cleanliness. The Japanese word for sleep, namuru, comes from a root meaning to lie quietly. This quietness wasn't just external, it was spiritual. The ancient Shinto faith, which revered the spirits, kami, of nature, saw nighttime as a liminal world, a time when spirits moved freely, when the barrier between human and divine thinned. Before going to sleep, people often purified themselves, washing their hands, faces, and mouths to cleanse away spiritual impurity. This wasn't a luxury, but a necessity. One entered sleep as one might enter a shrine, with humility. In early Japan, homes were simple, built of wood and paper screens that breathed with the seasons. People slept on tatami mats, often on thin fucons or even straw coverings, which could be easily rolled away by morning. This connection to the earth was intentional, a way to stay grounded, to feel the quiet pulse of the natural world beneath one's body. But it was not all stillness. In the Heian period, an age of refined courtly life around the 10th century, sleep began to carry rituals of beauty and emotion. Nobles perfumed their sleeves and bedding with incense, believing that dreams were influenced by scent. Letters, poems, and small trinkets were sometimes left beside pillows, symbolic of love or longing. The act of falling asleep was both romantic and sacred, a merging of art and soul. Then there was India, where sleep was understood not merely as rest, but as one of the four pillars of life: ahara, food; nidra, sleep; brahmacharya, discipline; and abhyanga, self-care. In the ancient system of Ayurveda, sleep was called nidra, and it was regarded as the most essential form of healing. The human body, Ayurveda taught, was governed by three energies: vata, air and movement; pitta, fire and transformation; and kapha, earth and structure. When these forces were in balance, one slept soundly, and the body healed naturally. But when imbalance arose, too much fire, too much motion, sleep was disturbed, and the spirit grew weary. To restore harmony, Ayurvedic scholars advise sleeping early, rising before sunrise, and preparing the body and mind through rituals that calm the senses. People would oil their feet and foreheads with warm sesame oil, believed to draw out fatigue and promote deep rest. Others drank herbal infusions of ashwagandha, cardamom, and milk to soothe the nerves and quiet the body's fire. And sleep, too, was tied to cosmic order. Ancient Indian philosophy described the night as the realm of Shiva, the cosmic destroyer and regenerator, a god who dances the rhythm of creation and dissolution. To fall asleep was, symbolically, to die and be reborn, to surrender the ego to the divine cycle of renewal. Dreams in India carried both personal and universal meaning. The Upanishads, philosophical texts thousands of years old, described sleep as one of the four states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and pure awareness. In deep sleep, they said, the self, Atman, returns to its source, untouched, eternal, free. To sleep well, then, was to touch the divine. Across all these lands, from the mountains of China to the temples of India and the quiet homes of Japan, one theme remained constant: sleep was sacred. It wasn't something people hurried through or fought against. It was something they prepared for, honored, respected, and entered as one might enter a temple or garden of the soul. And as the night embraced them, their homes glowed softly. The whisper of incense, the rustle of robes, the murmur of a final prayer before drifting into dreams. Sleep was not an ending, but a continuation, the other half of life's great rhythm. Section 11. Medieval European Nights. Fires, feasts, and sleep in cold castles. As we leave the gentle rhythms of East Asia, we journey northward into the stone halls and timbered homes of medieval Europe. Here, the way people slept was dictated not only by comfort, but also by climate, architecture, and the communal nature of life. The winters were long, the nights dark, and the cold seeped into every corner, shaping rituals, beliefs, and even social structures around rest. In the castles of the nobility, grand halls often served multiple purposes. During the day, they were places for feasting, discussion, and the planning of wars or alliances. But at night, these same halls could transform into sleeping quarters, sometimes for dozens of people. Large tapestries hung on the walls, not just for decoration, but also for insulation, trapping heat and softening the sounds of the stone chambers. Beds were rarely private, especially for the lower classes. In the homes of peasants, families often slept together on raised wooden platforms or straw mattresses laid directly on the floor, sharing body heat to ward off the biting cold. The wealthy might sleep under heavy furs and linens, sometimes even with a curtained bed to keep drafts away. But the principle remained the same. Sleep was a collective experience shaped by warmth and survival. The timing of sleep was also influenced by the seasons. Without artificial lighting, medieval people relied on the natural rhythm of the sun. In the winter months, they often rose late and went to bed early, sometimes just a few hours after sunset. Candlelight and oil lamps were precious and expensive, so the dark hours were best spent in slumber. Summer nights, in contrast, were longer, and the warmth of the sun allowed for more leisure and extended wakefulness. But warmth was not the only concern. Superstitions and protective rituals often accompanied sleep. It was common to place herbs, charms, or even iron objects near the bed to ward off evil spirits or the misfortune believed to wander in the darkness. Lavender, rosemary, and sage were favored, not only for their scents, but also for their perceived power to repel malevolent forces and promote restful sleep. In some regions, the fire itself was part of the bedtime ritual. Hearths burned all night, and people would arrange their sleeping quarters to benefit from the residual warmth. In certain medieval texts, instructions advise placing the bed close enough to the fire to stay warm, but far enough to avoid smoke inhalation or fire hazards. A careful balance between comfort and danger. The way people dressed for bed also reveals much about medieval attitudes toward sleep. Nightwear was often simple, functional, and made of wool or linen, insulating the body while allowing it to breathe. Wealthier individuals might have special nightcaps, not just to retain warmth, but also to cover the head, in accordance with modesty or superstition. Hair, unbound or carefully coiled, was sometimes tucked beneath these caps to avoid tangles and protect it from lice, a constant concern in crowded living conditions. Sleep in medieval Europe was rarely uninterrupted. The concept of a long, 8-hour rest was uncommon. Instead, segmented sleep dominated. Historical records and diaries reveal that many people would have a first sleep for a few hours, awaken around midnight for quiet reflection, prayer, or even domestic tasks, and then return to a second sleep until dawn. These hours of wakefulness were not considered strange or disruptive, but a natural part of the night's rhythm. The sounds of the night were also an integral part of sleep. Unlike the quiet, climate-controlled environments we enjoy today, medieval nights were alive with the creaks of timber, the groans of stone, and the whispers of the wind through thatched roofs. Even the distant sounds of animals, dogs, owls, or livestock in adjacent stalls, became familiar markers that signaled safety, danger, or the passing of time. People learned to sleep attuned to these ambient cues, developing a sensitivity to the environment that modern sleepers rarely experience. Meals played a subtle role in nightly rest. Supper was often the heaviest meal of the day, consumed at dusk, and typically consisted of stews, bread, and small amounts of meat. Ale or weak beer was common, even among children, because water could be unsafe. The warmth from food and drink not only nourished the body, but also prepared it for sleep, promoting a sense of fullness and drowsiness that eased the transition into rest. In certain regions, communal sleeping practices extended beyond family. Monasteries and convents, for instance, maintained strict schedules that balanced work, prayer, and sleep. Dormitories with rows of simple beds accommodated many individuals, each adhering to the same bedtime, often dictated by the tolling of bells. Silence was golden. Speaking at night was discouraged, fostering a meditative environment where sleep became a spiritual exercise as well as physical rest. Interestingly, some records hint at creative adaptations to environmental challenges. In Northern Europe, where winters could be particularly harsh, people sometimes placed their beds on wooden platforms raised above the floor. This not only insulated them from the damp ground, but also reduced exposure to vermin. In wealthier households, heated bricks or stones were placed near the bed, wrapped in cloth to radiate gentle warmth, an ancient precursor to modern heating pads. Even the architecture of homes reflected a deep awareness of sleep. Narrow windows minimized heat loss, thick walls offered insulation, and carefully placed tapestries or curtains created pockets of warmth and privacy. The layout of rooms often accounted for the movement of air and the path of sunlight, ensuring that beds could benefit from natural heat and light, even in the darkest months. Throughout it all, sleep was a communal, functional, and highly ritualized activity. Attuned to the cycles of nature and the demands of survival, it wasn't merely a break from labor. It was an essential element of daily life, intertwined with health, superstition, spirituality, and the rhythms of the seasons. And though the nights of medieval Europe might seem austere or primitive from a modern perspective, they reveal a profound awareness of the environment, the body, and the spirit, an understanding that sleep was not just for the body, but for the soul as well. As the hearth fires dwindled and the wind howled outside, the people of medieval Europe settled into their beds, wrapped in furs, surrounded by the scents of herbs and smoke. Their sleep was segmented, communal, and deeply intertwined with the natural world, a practice both practical and mystical, balancing warmth, safety, and spirituality. And so we leave the stone halls and thatched cottages, carrying with us the echo of ancient European nights, where sleep was as much about surviving the cold as it was about participating in the rhythm of life itself. Section 12. Sleep in indigenous and tribal societies. Nights in harmony with nature. As we leave the stone halls and frosty winters of medieval Europe, we journey to the forests, plains, and deserts, where indigenous and tribal societies lived in close harmony with nature. For these people, sleep was not a separate, isolated activity, but an integral part of daily life, shaped by the environment, the seasons, and the rhythms of the natural world. Every sound, scent, and sensation influenced the patterns of rest, creating a nightly ritual deeply attuned to survival and community. In many tribal villages, People slept in open-air shelters, lean-tos, or simple huts made of wood, reeds, or animal skins. The structures were designed for practicality, providing protection from rain, wind, and insects, while remaining ventilated and cool during the day. The materials themselves, woven reeds, layered furs, or grass mats, offered insulation and comfort, allowing sleepers to feel the gentle support beneath them while remaining connected to the earth. In some regions, such as the Great Plains of North America, indigenous families slept in teepees, conical tents made of wooden poles and animal hides. Teepees were carefully arranged to maximize warmth from central fires during cold nights and to allow smoke to escape. The floors were layered with furs, woven mats, and grasses, creating a soft, insulated surface. The smell of smoke and pine resin from the fires mingled with the natural scents of the surrounding environment, soothing the senses and signaling that night had arrived. Sleep was often communal, with family members, sometimes multiple generations, sharing a single sleeping area. This arrangement was practical, allowing bodies to share warmth, but it also strengthened social bonds. Elders and children often slept together, providing comfort and safety. In societies where predatory animals roamed, sleeping close to others helped ensure protection, and the rhythm of breathing and movement became a subtle, reassuring background to the night. Interestingly, sleep was structured around natural cycles rather than strict hours. People rose and slept according to the position of the sun and moon. In equatorial regions, where day and night were nearly equal, sleep was divided into periods that aligned with cool nighttime temperatures, avoiding the heat of midday. In regions with long winters or extended nights, sleep might extend for hours, punctuated by short periods of wakefulness for communal activities, storytelling, or tending to fires. The sounds of nature played a vital role in sleep. The rustle of leaves, the calls of nocturnal birds, and the distant howl of wolves or coyotes were part of the nightly ambiance. People learned to sleep attuned to these sounds, distinguishing between background noises and potential threats. The rhythm of wind through reeds or the gentle crackling of a fire created a calming environment, signaling safety and continuity. Many indigenous societies also employed herbal and botanical practices to aid sleep. Leaves, barks, and flowers with soothing properties were placed near sleeping areas, rubbed on the body, or burned to create fragrant smoke. In some African communities, for instance, sage, frankincense, and other resins were burned to purify the air and ward off insects, while in Polynesian islands, crushed tropical leaves released calming scents that helped children and adults alike drift into restful slumber. In desert regions, such as among Bedouin tribes, sleep was often conducted outdoors, under the stars. Large woven mats or rugs provided a comfortable base, and blankets or animal skins protected against cold nights. The expansive night sky, dotted with stars, became part of the sleep experience, connecting the sleepers to the natural and spiritual world. Stories of ancestors, celestial patterns, and seasonal changes were all part of the conversation during the waking periods between segmented sleeps. In the rainforests of South America, sleep was also shaped by environmental challenges. Elevated hammocks, made from vines and woven fibers, protected sleepers from insects, snakes, and damp ground. The gentle swinging motion of the hammock, combined with the sounds of flowing rivers, and nocturnal wildlife created a natural rhythm that encouraged relaxation. Sleep in these societies was less about isolation and more about being one with the environment, allowing the body and mind to align with the cycles of the forest. Cultural practices around sleep were deeply tied to ritual and spirituality. Many tribes viewed sleep as a liminal space, a time when the body rested, but the spirit could roam or communicate with ancestors. Some societies practiced nighttime prayers, songs, or meditative chants before sleep, creating a calm, intentional transition from wakefulness to rest. In other cultures, lullabies, rhythmic drumming, or storytelling were used to soothe children, often blending entertainment with moral lessons and historical memory. Interestingly, sleep arrangements often reflected social hierarchies and responsibilities. Elders, shamans, or leaders might sleep closer to the center of the village or hut, near fires or sacred objects, symbolizing their role as protectors and guides. Younger members and children slept around them, benefiting from warmth and safety. The placement of sleeping spaces was not arbitrary, but a reflection of communal care, respect, and survival strategy. Food and drink also subtly influenced sleep. Many societies ate their largest meal in the evening, often consisting of staple grains, roasted or dried meats, and fermented beverages. This meal provided not only energy, but also warmth, helping the body prepare for the long night. Drinking warm herbal teas or infusions before sleep was common, soothing the body and mind while reinforcing traditional knowledge about the natural world. Nighttime routines often included practical activities. In some tribes, tasks such as checking fires, tending animals, or watching for intruders were part of segmented sleep cycles. People slept lightly at first, waking periodically to ensure safety, and then returned to deeper sleep. This natural vigilance allowed communities to rest while remaining protected in environments where threats were ever present. Even the position of the body during sleep carried meaning. Some societies preferred curled positions to conserve warmth, while others stretched fully under open skies or in elevated hammocks for comfort and airflow. Sleep was a conscious adaptation to the physical environment, ensuring warmth, safety, and harmony with natural rhythms. Throughout these diverse societies, sleep was not a solitary artificial process. It was immersed in nature, guided by the environment, and interwoven with community, ritual, and survival. The nights were a tapestry of sound, scent, movement, and shared warmth, a living example of how humans can rest in harmony with the world around them. As the fires died down and the stars moved across the sky, indigenous families settled into their bedding, leaning on mats, furs, or hammocks. The rhythm of breathing, the whispers of nature, and the subtle scents of herbs created an atmosphere of calm. Sleep was both a physical necessity and a spiritual practice, a nightly ritual that connected generations and the natural world itself. And so, as we leave these villages, forests, and deserts, we carry with us the understanding that across time and geography, sleep has always been a complex, vital, and deeply human experience, shaped by environment, culture, and the timeless need for rest. Section 13. Coastal and fishing communities, sleeping to the rhythm of the sea. As we move from forests and deserts to the coastal shores and riverbanks, we encounter communities whose sleep patterns were intimately tied to the ebb and flow of the water. For those living by the sea, lakes, or rivers, the night was shaped not only by darkness, but by the sound of waves, the scent of salt, and the motion of tides. Sleep became a dance with nature, blending rest, vigilance, and communal life in ways that modern beds and blackout curtains could never replicate. In many coastal settlements, houses were simple yet practical, often built on stilts or raised platforms to protect against flooding and damp ground. Floors were layered with woven mats, dried reeds, or soft furs, allowing people to lie comfortably while remaining slightly elevated from the earth. The gentle rocking of these structures during tidal movements or high winds created a natural lullaby, a rhythmic sway that calmed the body and mind. Fishing communities, whether along the Mediterranean coast, the Scandinavian fjords, or Southeast Asian river deltas, often aligned their sleep with the rhythms of their work. Men and women rose before dawn to prepare nets, mend boats, and read the weather. The nights were often spent in short, segmented sleep, allowing fishermen and their families to wake during periods when tides were favorable or storms threatened. This segmented pattern, though different from modern consolidated sleep, created a flexible harmony with the natural world. Inside the homes, communal sleep was common. Families often shared a single room or sleeping area, with children sleeping between parents or elders. In some communities, sleep was arranged so that someone was always awake to watch for high tides, protect boats, or maintain fires. This natural vigilance was part of the rhythm of life, blending rest with responsibility. Unlike modern sleep, which often isolates the individual, these arrangements created a sense of shared security and interconnectedness. The sounds of water played a vital role in the sleep experience. Waves lapping against the shore, the distant cry of seabirds, or the gentle rush of river currents formed a soothing nocturnal backdrop. People became highly attuned to these natural cues, able to discern between normal night sounds and those that signaled danger, such as approaching storms, predators, or rival tribes. The auditory landscape of sleep was both comforting and functional, a form of environmental awareness that supported survival. Sleep preparations often included rituals involving water and air. In some coastal cultures, small fires or oil lamps were lit near windows or entrances to keep insects away while providing warmth. Families might sprinkle salt, herbs, or crushed shells around sleeping areas, believing these substances protected against illness, misfortune, or even spirits. The scent of dried seaweed, salt water, and burning herbs mingled in the air, creating a distinctive olfactory atmosphere that helped signal the transition from wakefulness to rest. Food and drink played a subtle role in nightly routines. Evening meals were typically light but nourishing, often featuring fish, shellfish, seaweed, and local grains. In temperate climates, fermented beverages or herbal infusions were consumed to warm the body and soothe digestion. These meals were eaten in communal settings, often just before nightfall, reinforcing both social bonds and bodily rhythms that facilitated sleep. In regions with long coastlines or frequent storms, families sometimes adopted mobile or flexible sleeping arrangements. Hammocks, temporary mats, or small platforms could be moved indoors or outdoors, depending on the weather and tides. This adaptability was crucial, as sudden storms could flood low-lying areas, while calm nights offered opportunities to sleep outdoors, enjoying cool breezes and the smell of the ocean. The environment dictated when and where sleep occurred, emphasizing flexibility over rigidity. Children in these communities often learned early to sleep lightly, waking with subtle changes in temperature, light, or sound. Parents might lull them with stories of sea creatures, the power of tides, or legendary storms, blending entertainment with practical knowledge. Lullabies were often rhythmic and repetitive, echoing the gentle sway of boats or the rolling of waves, teaching children to relax while remaining attentive to the natural world. For fishermen and sailors, sleep during voyages was a careful balance between deep rest and alertness. On boats, hammocks or mats were tied securely to prevent slipping, and sleepers learned to adjust to the motion of the water. Crew members often took shifts, ensuring that someone was awake at all times to monitor navigation, weather, and safety, while others rested deeply, trusting in the shared vigilance of the group. This pattern of alternating sleep created a collective rhythm, blending individual rest with communal responsibility. The rituals of sleep in coastal communities also included spiritual practices. Many cultures believed that the sea was inhabited by spirits, gods, or ancestors who could influence fortune and misfortune. Before sleeping, families might offer small tokens, chant prayers, or perform cleansing rituals with water or herbs to ensure protection through the night. Sleep, therefore, was not merely physical rest, but an intimate spiritual engagement, a nightly negotiation with the elements and unseen forces. Even the position of the body during sleep had significance. Sleeping curled on mats or stretched on hammocks conserved warmth and accommodated shared spaces, while some sailors preferred semi-upright positions on deck to observe the horizon even while resting. Blankets, furs, or woven coverings provided insulation, but the sound, smell, and movement of water were the constant companions, creating a unique environmental cocoon for each sleeper. As the night deepened, fires dimmed, and the village settled into a quiet hum, the interplay of waves, wind, and whispered conversation created a soothing, continuous rhythm. Sleep in these communities was both restorative and attentive, allowing people to rest while remaining connected to nature, their families, and the challenges of the sea. Every ripple, rustle, and murmur shaped the night, crafting an experience of slumber that was both practical and deeply human. In coastal and riverine societies, sleep reflected an enduring partnership with nature. It was segmented, communal, and flexible, guided by tides, weather, and environmental cues. It blended work, survival, and spiritual awareness, illustrating how humans have always found ways to rest within the rhythms of the world around them. The ocean's song, the river's murmur, and the whisper of winds became the lullaby of countless generations, a timeless reminder of the deep connection between humans and their environment. And so, as the moon rose over the water and stars shimmered on the horizon, families lay in shared mats, hammocks, and simple shelters, cradled by the environment they had long learned to respect and understand. Sleep in this context was a dance between rest and awareness, between the body and the natural world, creating a nightly harmony that was both essential and profoundly calming. Section 14. Nomadic desert cultures sleeping under the endless sky. As we leave the rhythmic waters of coastal villages, let us wander into the vast deserts, where nomadic tribes have traveled for centuries, following the sun, stars, and seasonal pastures. In these harsh and open landscapes, sleep was an experience shaped by extreme conditions. The scorching days, freezing nights, and wide open skies. For desert dwellers, sleeping was not only about rest. It was a matter of protection, survival, and connection to the environment. Nomadic tents were often lightweight and portable, made of woven reeds, animal hides, or felted wool, designed to offer shelter from sun, wind, and sandstorms. At night, these tents became cozy spaces, insulated by layers of woven mats or rugs. Families would lay out blankets, furs, or thick textiles, sometimes piling them high to create soft sleeping surfaces above the sand. The tent walls would sway slightly in the breeze, and the subtle sounds of the desert, the distant howl of a desert fox, the whisper of sand shifting in the wind, formed a natural lullaby, guiding the nomads into sleep. The timing of sleep was crucial in desert life. During scorching summer days, people would rest in shaded areas or sleep through the heat of midday, often taking short naps on mats or in hammocks. Nights, when temperatures dropped sharply, were reserved for longer, more consolidated sleep. Families often adjusted their schedules according to sunrise and sunset, rising early to gather water, tend animals, or travel, and resting again as the heat of the day intensified. Sleep, in this sense, was flexible and adaptive, always in harmony with nature's extremes. Desert nomads slept communally, sharing tents or open sleeping areas. Parents and children often lay close together for warmth, while elders positioned themselves at the edges to monitor the environment. Many nomadic tribes maintained a system of night watches, ensuring that someone remained awake to watch for predators, sandstorms, or wandering animals. This careful balance of vigilance and rest created a rhythm of life where sleep was not isolated, but interwoven with family and community responsibility. The sky played a central role in desert sleep. Without trees or mountains to block the view, nomads observed the stars and moon as natural guides. Celestial bodies help travelers orient themselves, predict weather changes, and even determine sleeping arrangements. Some nomadic groups would sleep in open areas, using blankets or rugs, and gaze at constellations, finding comfort in the endless expanse of the night sky. The constellations also carried stories and lessons, passed down orally, making sleep a time of reflection, imagination, and connection with ancestral knowledge. Fire and warmth were important companions in the cold desert nights. Small fires were built at a safe distance from tents to provide heat, light, and protection from animals. The scent of burning wood, herbs, or dried animal dung drifted gently into sleeping areas, creating a calming and familiar atmosphere. In some tribes, smoke was believed to ward off evil spirits, while the fire's warmth helped bodies maintain comfort as temperatures dropped dramatically. The interplay of firelight, shadows, and subtle sounds contributed to a meditative environment, easing the transition from wakefulness to sleep. Food and hydration influenced nightly routines. Evening meals were simple yet nourishing, often consisting of dried meats, grains, milk, or dates. These meals were eaten shortly before sunset, allowing digestion before sleep. In colder seasons, hot teas or milk infusions provided warmth and relaxation. Rituals around food, such as sharing small portions, offering thanks, or passing herbs and spices became part of the nightly rhythm, blending nutrition, social bonding, and the preparation for sleep. Sleeping positions in the desert were practical and influenced by the environment. People often curled up on mats or spread out under blankets, using small cushions or rolled textiles to support the head. Some slept near their livestock, which provided warmth and a sense of security. Nomads learned to adjust their bodies to the softness of the sand, the unevenness of mats, and the movement of the tent, training themselves to rest comfortably in minimalistic settings. This adaptability ensured that sleep remained restorative, despite environmental challenges. Noise and movement were subtle companions. Desert nights were generally quiet, but occasional sounds, a shifting dune, the footsteps of camels, or the rustle of a tent flap, were both familiar and alerting. Sleepers became attuned to these minor disturbances, able to wake partially if needed, yet remain in a state of restful relaxation. Unlike modern sleep in controlled environments, desert sleep required sensitivity to surroundings, blending deep rest with subtle awareness. In some cultures, rituals before sleep were common. Nomads might recite prayers, sing lullabies, or perform cleansing gestures with water or herbs. Children were often lulled to sleep with stories of desert animals, heroic ancestors, or the night sky. Adults might meditate on the day's travel, their livestock, or the weather, using gentle breathing and rhythmic movements to prepare the mind and body for rest. These practices reinforce the connection between sleep, spirituality, and daily life. Seasonal changes affected sleep arrangements. During cooler months, sleeping mats were layered with extra textiles, and fires were maintained longer into the night. In hot months, tents were opened to allow airflow, and sleeping might occur partially outside under starlit skies. Sleep remained a dynamic activity, shaped by climate, location, and lifestyle, highlighting the adaptability and ingenuity of nomadic peoples. Despite the harshness of desert life, the nightly routine cultivated a deep sense of peace and security. Families and communities found comfort in shared sleeping spaces, gentle rhythms of fire and wind, and the quiet continuity of natural cycles. Sleep was not merely a pause from activity, but an integrated part of existence, deeply intertwined with survival, observation, and reflection. As the night deepened, the desert fell into silence. The distant howl of an animal, the soft murmur of a breeze over dunes, and the occasional crackle of a dying fire became the lullabies of countless nomadic generations. Sleep in the desert was immersive and meditative, allowing the body to rest while keeping the mind gently attuned to the world. The balance between vulnerability and vigilance created a profound connection to the natural environment, a nightly ritual that sustained communities for centuries. And so, under the endless sky, surrounded by sand, stars, and the gentle warmth of fires, desert dwellers drifted into sleep. Their nights were shaped by nature, tradition, and careful attention, blending rest, awareness, and a sense of belonging to the larger rhythm of life. Sleep became not only a necessary pause, but also a calming, restorative, and deeply human experience, reminding us that even in the most challenging environments, humans find ways to rest, rejuvenate, and harmonize with the world around them. Section 15. Forest and Mountain Dwellers, Sleeping Amidst Nature's Quiet Majesty. As our journey through ancient sleeping practices nears its conclusion, we turn to the forests and mountains, where people lived in close harmony with nature, surrounded by trees, streams, and rocky slopes. For these communities, sleep was a delicate balance between safety, comfort, and attunement to the environment, and it carried both practical and spiritual significance. Mountain and forest dwellers often constructed simple wooden cabins, lean-tos, or stone shelters, designed to protect them from wind, rain, snow, and wild animals. Interiors were modest, yet thoughtfully arranged. Sleeping platforms of wood or stone were covered with layers of furs, woven mats, and soft moss, providing insulation and cushioning. In some regions, people slept on raised platforms to avoid dampness or crawling insects, while still remaining close to the sounds and scents of the forest. These communities understood the importance of fire and warmth. Evening fires were maintained not only for cooking, but also for comfort and safety. The smell of burning pine, oak, or birch filled the air, while sparks and flickering flames cast dancing shadows across walls and ceilings. The fire's warmth penetrated the cold mountain nights, creating a soothing atmosphere that encouraged relaxation and deep sleep. Sleeping schedules were closely tied to sunrise and sunset, as well as seasonal changes. In summer, long daylight hours allowed for extended work and activity, followed by brief, refreshing sleep in the cooler evening hours. Winter nights, long and dark, required early retreats indoors and extended rest, often interspersed with waking periods to stoke fires or check on livestock. The rhythm of sleep adapted naturally to the cycles of day, night, and season, fostering a profound connection to the surrounding environment. Forest dwellers often slept communally, with families or small groups huddled together for warmth and security. Children were tucked close to parents. Elders took positions near the walls or hearth, and younger adults might sleep near entrances to monitor for danger. This arrangement not only provided safety, but also reinforced social bonds, making sleep a shared and comforting experience. The natural environment shaped every aspect of sleep. The sounds of the forest at night, rustling leaves, distant owl calls, murmuring streams, served as both lullabies and gentle reminders of the world beyond the shelter. The occasional crack of a branch or distant howl could stir vigilance, but for the most part, these sounds blended into a tranquil, meditative soundscape, guiding the mind into calm and rest. Seasonal adaptations were essential. In colder climates, people layered furs and blankets, insulated walls with moss or straw, and sometimes even slept in temporary shelters dug into the earth for warmth. In warmer seasons, sleeping might occur partially outdoors on raised wooden platforms, surrounded by the gentle chorus of night insects and the whispering wind through leaves. Sleep was never uniform. It was a flexible and responsive practice, tuned to the needs of both body and environment. Rituals and routines before sleep held special importance. Forest and mountain communities often engaged in gentle reflection, prayer, or storytelling as night fell. Children were lulled to sleep with tales of forest spirits, animal wisdom, or heroic ancestors. Adults might recount the day's labors, plan for the morrow, or meditate on the cycles of nature, using breath, posture, and attention to prepare the mind and body for rest. These practices infused sleep with meaning and mindfulness, transforming it into a holistic experience of restoration. Diet and hydration also influenced sleep quality. Evening meals were simple yet nourishing: roasted grains, root vegetables, dried meats, and occasionally wild fruits or nuts. Hot herbal infusions, broths, or milk provided warmth and relaxation. Meals were timed to allow digestion, ensuring comfort during sleep, and often included rituals of gratitude or sharing, further reinforcing community bonds and a sense of security. Animals often played a role in nightly routines. Domesticated dogs or goats might sleep nearby, providing warmth, companionship, and early warning of potential dangers. Some communities even allowed livestock to rest partially inside shelters, integrating their care into the rhythm of nightly life. The presence of animals enhanced the sense of vigilance, while also contributing to the tactile and sensory comfort of the sleeping environment. For those dwelling in mountains and forests, sleep was also a form of attunement to the natural world. The movement of stars, the phases of the moon, and the rhythms of animals all guided the timing and quality of rest. Many communities observed that sleeping in alignment with natural light and darkness enhanced vitality and mental clarity. Sleep became not merely a biological necessity, but a ritualized connection to the cosmos, an intimate experience of being part of a larger, harmonious system. Even in harsh or unpredictable weather, ancient forest and mountain dwellers demonstrated remarkable resilience and ingenuity. They adapted their sleeping spaces, routines, and rituals to temperature fluctuations, seasonal changes, and environmental hazards. Their knowledge, passed down orally through generations, reflected a deep understanding of nature and human physiology, long before modern science could explain the mechanisms of sleep. In these settings, the transition to sleep was gradual and mindful. As evening shadows deepened, fires burned low, and the forest quieted, individuals moved into soft resting positions, adjusting blankets, furs, or moss for comfort. Breathing slowed, thoughts drifted with the rhythm of night sounds, and the body surrendered to rest, while remaining subtly aware of the environment. Sleep was both restorative and protective, a careful balance between vulnerability and attunement. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight filtered through tree canopies or touched the peaks of distant mountains. Birds called, streams murmured, and the world began to stir. Sleepers gradually awakened, refreshed and aligned with the cycles of nature. Their nights, shaped by careful observation, community support, and adaptation to the environment, nourished both body and spirit, enabling them to face the challenges of the day with vitality and presence. From bustling villages to open deserts, from dense forests to rugged mountains, the ways humans have slept over millennia reveal a fascinating interplay of environment, culture, and survival. Sleep was never a uniform or purely passive activity. It was shaped by temperature, terrain, community, and ritual, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of comfort, security, and human needs. Across these diverse landscapes, people found ingenious ways to rest, layering furs, adjusting mats, stoking fires, observing the stars, and integrating vigilance with relaxation. Sleep became a shared, immersive, and adaptive practice, attuned to nature's rhythms and social responsibilities. Children, elders, and adults alike experienced rest not only as a biological necessity, but as a cultural and sensory ritual, rich in meaning and connection. Even in the harshest conditions, scorching deserts, frigid mountains, dense forests, humans cultivated sleep practices that were both practical and meditative. They relied on observation, intuition, and communal support to ensure that rest was restorative, safe, and harmonized with the cycles of the natural world. Through these historical practices, we gain not only insight into the daily lives of our ancestors, but also a deeper appreciation for the timeless art of sleep, reminding us that rest, when approached mindfully and adaptively, remains one of the most essential and restorative experiences in human life.